overwhelmed and saying this isn't what we signed up for. It most absolutely is what we signed up for.
Yep.
Otherwise, why trust us? Why, the general public says, tell us what to do. Tell us what the science is. Tell us what the medical science is. Tell us what we need to know. You know, the presentations I've been giving in Texas, the one reverberating message that I keep getting is, okay, you may be talking over our heads, but do not dumb it down, because the people are dying for information about where this virus came from, what can be done to treat it, what's really going on with the vaccines, what's real, what's not. And in the absence of real scientists stepping forward, the scientist or the pretend scientists have nobody telling the world that they don't know what they're talking about.
Oh, you know what, Richard? I've just got to check something. Can you give me a
Sure.
sound check?
Testing one,
Yeah,
two,
yeah, okay,
three.
it's good.
Okay, good.
I have problems with sometimes I have people join and then I blather away thinking I can see my mic working, and then
Oh well,
but
there's lots of people that would really be excited if you muted me.
well, let's see. Are we okay? It's starting to come online right now. So what was I don't know how
Yeah,
much of that previous discussion got streamed or not,
lost
but
or not. And I don't have your channel up, so I can't see if somebody's saying something to me or asking a question. So I'll just defer to you and let me know if there's something. But no, I mean, the emergency use authorization documents, and vaccine efficacy. Well, let me back this up. Back in 2007, the Chinese published a paper that showed that they had developed a successful vaccine to SARS-CoV-1, or what was just being called SARS-CoV, using conventional vaccine technology. Now, it took them 5 years to get there, but they attenuated the SARS-CoV virus, and they ended up with 100% immune response. That these guys actually measure T cells and antibody titers. God forbid that they actually measure what it is that we're looking for. And so I'm confused about why that has gotten abandoned, and we've gone to mRNA and dRNA vaccines that have only, I mean, they call them mRNA and DNA drugs that have been used for more than a decade unsuccessfully in cancer treatments.
well, here's what I think is an important first step is one is to not refer to them as drugs or vaccines. That they should be titled as what they are, which the techniques are gene therapies. It might not be gene editing, as they would like the hard description to apply right
Right.
now, but all the time that they're getting some vector, whether it's the lipid nanoparticles or a hollowed out adenovirus, it doesn't matter. But that's a gene therapy approach, and that shouldn't be forgotten.
Well, and the gene therapy that they're using, let's not forget that the mRNA and then Janssen's DNA. I love it when they call it double-stranded DNA, like there's DNA that's not double-stranded. Um, is actually a code sequence for a spike protein that doesn't exist naturally.
Mm,
That's the real kicker with these things, which is it's not even a naturally occurring genome that they're injecting. Number one. Number two, I resisted for the longest amount of time with the concept of mRNA from the Pfizer and Moderna getting into the nucleus with the reverse transcriptase. But that one preprint showed at least the nucleocapsid component of SARS-CoV getting in there. But the Janssen DNA one makes no pretense about it. I mean, for the DNA of the Janssen vaccine, whatever drug, to get in and work, it has to get into the nucleus.
mm.
And so, when people say, well, isn't that one a better one? It's like, wait a minute, is that not a worse step? Because now they've taken an artificial sequence, man-made. They've made sure that the deoxyribose is now ribose. They've changed the uracil to thymine, and they double-stranded the sucker, and now they're injecting it into people. And I've hesitated
I'm just trying to
calling it.
remind myself of the Janssen. Is this the nanoparticle? Yeah, this is where they sort
Yeah,
of
so
get the.
Janssen's the adenovirus. Yeah, I mean it's Johnson and Johnson's, but it's Janssen that's making it.
Yeah,
So it's the adenovirus, which is interesting because when you go back and you look at some of the stuff, in some of the original stuff that was done in China when they were looking at it, there were components of the adenovirus showing up in some of what they were processing, trying to sort out. Well, why was that
hmm.
there? I mean, what? I mean, unless that was part of a vaccine that they were working on at the time, that got caught up in the mix of what they were sampling out. You know,
Uh, yeah,
which
I don't know. I don't know what to make of the claims that there is adenovirus in SARS-CoV-2. I haven't seen anything really concrete. This is my issue with that, and
Right. Well, it wasn't that it was part of the SARS-CoV-2, but
the
it looked like somebody might have been playing around with a vaccine for SARS-CoV-2, and it was being picked up in these same people that had the SARS-CoV-2. So the question was, why was there this mix of both SARS-CoV-2 and some adenovirus component? It wasn't so much the preposition or proposal that the adenovirus was inserted into the SARS-CoV-2. They seem to be two different phenomena that were being picked up, raising the question that, wait a minute, isn't that being used as a vector for, I mean, it's clearly a vector for Janssen. So was that what was going on at the time with all these early cases? Were they seeing a bioweapon that somebody was testing out their treatment for?
yeah. And look, there's I don't know how much you've been following what's been going on this channel, but obviously the narrative is moving forward as the spillover hypothesis collapses, right? It's
Yeah.
done. It's only got so much legs, and but what it's done is it sort of gave them a year's breathing space. But now what you're seeing is a push towards, and this is what I was streaming about last night, which is this uh, con, uh, contain the next step of the narrative, which
Mm.
people are going to say, okay, your trust is broken now with this first round, which was look at eco health and the the excuse me 1 second, the push towards the push towards uh, subverting the scientific journals in such a way that they would have been able to get away with the move without resistance. They would have just gone straight to the mass vaccine program, and they
Yeah.
would have all just been like, oh, this is nature, this is what we live in right now, this is all part of the global warming phenomenon, expect to see more. But then there was enough people that sort of stood up at the time and said, hey, you've got to you don't just get to spin up scientific narratives out of nowhere and expect people just to buy it lock, stock and barrel. And as that is collapsing, they've got the next narrative control in, which is this. It's a guy being pushed by Jamie Metzel. I don't know if you're familiar with that guy.
No, I don't know him.
So let me just find his background just so I can bring it up. But anyway, so he gets onto the Joe Rogan podcast, and he's been on Fox News as of yesterday, and he's pushing this the idea that there is this lab leak, right? That something has happened in a lab leak, but it's still this very much curated narrative. Whereas, okay, it might have leaked from a lab, but it's got nothing to do with the extreme end of dual use technologies. It was they cultured it, they were handling it, and it got out. And that's our spillover event. So it's still sort of 1 foot in the spillover, and just we're adding in this lab component. And he's very well, he pushes a line that we shouldn't be too judgmental, etc. And and now he's the anointed one that's going on these programs. So where a year ago they had Michael Osterholm on Joe Rogan to sort of speak to the plebs, now it's Jamie Metzel going on there and saying, well, we need a proper investigation into the lab if we're to get to the bottom of this. And let me just read off his bio. So his website, let me just, I'll pull it up so you can put it in the chat so you can see it. But technology futurist, geopolitics expert, social entrepreneur, sci-fi novelist, keynote speaker. Not a scientist. Okay.
You don't need to be anymore.
No.
Apparently.
Yeah, he has a book, Hacking Darwin, Genetic Engineering and the Future of Humanity. Let's see how much that is to purchase. But yeah, grifting a book, what do you know? 15.29. And anyway, but he's obviously been anointed to go through, and there's more. We need to find out more about Jamie to fully understand who he is. So he works for the Atlantic Council. He is, let's see, works, early life and education. So I'll give you his education just so you build a picture of him. So Metzel is the son of Kurt, a pediatrician, and Marilyn, a clinical psychologist. Oh, can we say MK Ultra? He is a magna cum laude, Phi Beta Kappa graduate of Brown University. For the Brown Alumni magazine, Metzel wrote an article describing having a Wikipedia about himself as a narcissistic pleasure. Oh, and he does seem a narcissist, that much is true. And how he had asked an assistant to edit it on multiple occasions. He also holds a PhD in Southeast Asian history from Oxford University. Oh, and a JD from Harvard Law School. There you go, a fellow JD dude.
Don't keep punching.
So he served as Deputy Staff Director and Senior Counselor of the United States Senate Committee on Foreign Relations, Senior Coordinator for International Public Information, and Senior Advisor to the Undersecretary for Public Diplomacy and Public Affairs at the Department of State, and Director of Multilateral and Humanitarian Affairs on the National Security Council. In the Clinton administration, he was the primary drafter of the Presidential Decision Directive 68 on international public information. And coordinated public information for Iraq and Kosovo. From 1991 to 93, Metzel was a human rights officer for the United Nations Trans Authority in Cambodia. Oh, can I just put that out there? A whiff of child smuggling, and let's get that up front. This is what I'm thinking of this dude. In 2003, Metzel directed a Council on Foreign Relations study which argued the United States was not doing enough to prepare first responders, police, fire, rescue, and medical agencies to handle another catastrophic attack. Metzel is okay, blah 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 blah, and okay, he's completed 13 Ironman triathlons, 30 marathons. Bravo!
That's great. I'm delighted.
So this is the man that's been anointed to take the public forward in the current circumstances, which is well, the DASAC line doesn't work anymore, and that argumentation from authority is the failed in that particular round. And so there's one tweet that I just need to find, see if I have it from yesterday. Yeah, so
Twitter.
Yeah, so he put out a tweet yesterday, and I'd already I'm very suspicious of this dude after going on Joe Rogan, giving half the story and not relaying all the factors at play here. It's easy to blame China, right? We expect China to do it, okay?
China and the United States and Israel and the UK and a number of other people. Yeah.
So
well, let's make sure everybody that's been involved actually gets held into or brought into crimes against humanity trials here.
Yeah, and so this is his tweet. I'll send you the link because there's an important thread that runs through this. And again, I want to shout out Mark at Housatonic Live because he found this. Okay, So
And FYI to Mark, I can't seem to connect with him, but I want to acknowledge all the work that he's done to exposing a lot of things, as well as yourself, for everybody listening to you.
thank you.
Yeah.
So, and like I say, I didn't find the big thread in this, which is, I will get to this. So, a new international treaty for pandemics recognizing One Health connects all humans. So that's in quotes. One Health connects all humans, animals, and our planet is a wonderful idea. Let's work with at Dr. Tedros, at WHO, at EU Commission, and others to make this possible and great at One Shared World. So this is his website. He's full on globalist plutocrat. I don't know. I don't know what he's a technocrat of this of the. And this is. I'll just link you the announcement from the European Council of the European Union, and in there they keep mentioning One Health, One Health. It's all One Health, and everything is vaccine for One Health, vaccine for One Health. And then they'll mention therapies, vaccines for One Health. And there's a very disturbing history once you start seeing how this doctrine has been pushed through the institutions, through the well, especially ecology. That's where it comes from. That's Peter Daszak's grift, right?
Realm.
Yeah, that's a polite way of putting it. I'll call it a grift. But yeah, realm if you want to be diplomatic. You speak to the public, dude. I'll just sit here throwing I love the hand grenades over.
But it just depends. I mean, as scientific as I stay, which I think I have to, there are times that I really just genuinely do expose the people, and the general trend of what these presentations are, watching the people's responses, is that these people need to be held legally accountable. And I don't mean in a nice court. I don't mean in a court that's already predetermined what's going to happen as the outcome and it's hiding the truth from the world. I'm talking about an international tribunal for crimes against humanity. I'm talking about, Nuremberg 2 or whatever we want to call it, because these are not good people. I think they've been surprised by the resistance. I'm not sure what they were expecting. I guess they were expecting, like the animal models, that if you tell the animal that there's a problem, it knows there's a problem. You teach it a behavior to avoid that. You give it positive feedback that its behavior is avoiding it, that the animal will continue to bar press for rewards, which in this case seems to be marijuana and Krispy Kreme donuts. In the United States, where they're reinforcing people for getting the vaccine by promising them those two things in some instances. That's a pretty cheap price for people experimenting on your health with something that hasn't been proven. And I haven't been watching you because I haven't, one, known where you've been at, and number two, unfortunately, I've been busier since being here than I clearly was before. And I don't know if you saw, but I did a small segment on the vaccines. And if you look at the number, so with vaccine efficacy is how many people basically ended up getting the disease while taking the vaccine versus people who got the disease who didn't take the vaccine, which is kind of like, it's backwards. It's a flip of how I think about medicine, which is, I don't walk up to a patient and say, here, I want you to take this medicine because it failed this many times. I'm supposed to sell you on the concept that if I prescribe a medication for you, it's going to improve your health and reduce the problem. And if you do that, if you look at the numbers from the EUA documents themselves, several things stand out. First off, yes, people who did not get vaccinated ended up with COVID-19 more than people who didn't get vaccinated. Nobody can argue those numbers. But if you look at the Pfizer data, 7 days after the second shot, there is no statistical difference in the numbers of people who ended up with COVID who got vaccinated versus the ones who didn't. If you look at the Moderna data, 14 days after the second shot, there is no statistical difference in the number of people who ended up with COVID-19 who got vaccinated versus people who did not get vaccinated. And if you look at the Janssen data, and they want you to really focus on the 14-day data, there is a statistical difference of p less than 0.05. However, 2 weeks later, at 4 weeks post Janssen or Johnson & Johnson vaccine, that difference is gone between the vaccinated and the non-vaccinated. So the end result of the EUA documents that got FDA approval for EUA use is that there's no difference between the number of people ending up with COVID who got vaccinated versus who didn't. And that would be like me saying, Kevin, I have this great blue pill I want you to take. Now, it's not going to treat your diabetes or your heart disease or your COVID any better than a placebo will, but I want you to take it. Would you take it?
Does it give me a boner?
No, it's not even going to do that.
Well, that's not the blue pill I want then. So,
right? Yeah, yeah. So maybe you should take this red pill then.
well, yeah, I guess the red pills.
That's what I was going for. You obviously went for Viagra. So sorry about that. No, I mean, so we're using vaccines that do not, and they don't have a statistically significant outcome versus not getting vaccinated. Now, that is the fact that that went through the committees means that nobody on those committees bothered to ask the obvious, to me, question of, is there a difference in what it's supposed to do, which is to prevent you from getting COVID? Because it doesn't, vaccines don't prevent people from getting infected. They ameliorate or lessen the symptoms, because the idea is to have a T cell and B cell memory so that you respond faster, so that you become symptomatic for a shorter period of time with a more rapid immune response.
I will just add as a caveat, I saw a study yesterday, I think it was from CDC, maybe I can pull it up, but they were saying that the transmission in health workers was reduced. So they were putting it more into the domain of a sterilizing vaccine now rather than a treatment. But again, I don't know. I don't know who to believe right now when there's been such obvious ethical breaches every step of the way, going back years, for include the science, include the research
Yeah.
that put us here in the first place, and now we're supposed to buy everything that they say. That's not how you do things scientifically. Everything should come under scrutiny.
Well, and one of the keys to me that a science is valid, a scientific study is valid, is that somebody else can repeat it. I mean, that's how you, I mean, that's the validity. And I say that not only from publishing things, but from the sense of then watching somebody else come behind and repeat that experiment. There's a sense of assurance to me when somebody else comes behind and repeats my work. It's like, yeah, okay, yeah, I did it right. You know, I mean, I didn't somehow botch this up and wasn't smart enough to know I botched it up. Somebody else came behind and they're validating these same points. That to me, please, I want people to validate the stuff. I want to validate other people's things, and I want people to validate my things. Or if I'm wrong, please tell me, so that we can get closer to the truth. But you're not seeing that out of these people that are out there now that have been skewing the science, and it didn't just begin in 2019. They were working on it for some period of time. Although I think, and you pointed out on your program that, the Lancet and others just really stuck their foot in their mouth in the last year or two by accepting into publication materials that weren't valid. I mean, for Daszak to put into the Lancet a year before a little bit less than a year before he even goes over in his pre-10 position with WHO to look at the Chinese lab and say the virus is from a wet market or a zoonotic.
Mm.
What's going on with the journals that they do that? I mean, I guess New England Journal of Medicine is now a computer science journal because one of its lead authors seems to be a guy who writes or is in charge of a computer company, Bill Gates.
Mm. Well, I
Yeah,
mean, that would be stretching computer guy for some
ability.
people. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's some
Well,
doubt about that, right?
I mean, his ability to work on viruses has already been shown that he and his staff have some limited success in dealing with viruses of the computer type. I'm not certain why they would want to take on a more sophisticated model, which would be a biological virus. But no, I'm shocked by the fact that they thought they were going to get by with this. I mean, I think they must have really thought that they were seriously going to get by with it, but the integrity is crumbling. And with Redfield coming out and saying, he believes that the virus came from the Wuhan lab and that it was there before September, which I think is clear given the timeline of the people that we do know that got infected with it and the incubation period of this virus. Raises the question to me of what's in Redfield's mind. What Redfield is responding to something like all of us do when we decide we have to talk about something. And when you're talking about something of this magnitude order with the nefarious components involved in it, you have to wonder what's going on. Is Redfield concerned about something? Is Redfield protecting
His ass
something?
and pension. That's it.
It's what?
It's his ass and pension. That's all he's worried about.
Yeah, and I at this point in time, I think the reality is somebody's beginning to throw somebody else under the bus.
Yeah.
And it's a matter of who's gonna come out first so that they can look like the hero and point fingers at others. But the CDC is very much aware of the CDC invited me to go to Greece in 2005 and talk about two things. So if anybody thinks the CDC is unfamiliar with the work that I've been working on, they're not paying attention. In 2005, I went to Athens, Greece, at the request of the CDC to talk about the inflammation and cardiovascular disease theory, which included the role of viruses in inflammatory diseases. And I went there and I talked about the breast cancer component of FMTVDM. And at that time, the head of the CDC wanted to make certain that I would get back in touch with them once the patent was patented. And when I tried to do that, Seffrin was SEFFRIN was no longer there at the CDC. And nobody would tell me where he went.
Well,
with the cancer people. So they're aware of this work, and they were aware of it in 2005, and they've been playing around with it. Health and Human Services has been funding gain of function research at least back to 1999, and the Department of Defense is responsible for more than 39 million of the 61 million that Peter Daszak got for gain of function. And I don't know if you're aware, but the Fort Detrick provided a policy advisor by the name of David Franz to EcoHealth, which shows more than money. It shows this is what we want you to do.
Explain who David Franz is. He's at
Well,
Kansas. He was.
he was a former commander for Fort Detrick, and which is well known as our bioweapon biodefense facility in the United States, and that dates back at least into the 1940s. Um,
But he had an academic position, as far as I
oh,
remember.
I'm not sure. I don't have that in front of me, so I apologize. Um,
Well, point being that EcoHealth is literally it's a front group for DoD. I don't know. DoD can include CIA, whatever you want to put it,
oh yeah.
and it doesn't matter. They had a very when you see the bigger picture, obvious ulterior motive here, and there's a guy that you need to listen to. I'll send you the link for
Okay.
The guy that's talking. His name is Andrew Weber, and Andrew Weber was the. Let me find his details. Andrew Weber, and I'll send you the link. And let's see, he was head of sort of biowarfare, nuclear, biological, chemical, and Obama. And
Yeah.
he was on the. So there was a talk by the Hoover administration. And he was sitting there with another Andrew, and I can never remember his last name. Hurst, I think, something like German sounding name. But he screen. So take a look at this guy. He was Assistant Secretary of Defense for Nuclear, Chemical, and Biological Defense Programs. His areas of responsibility: U.S. nuclear, chemical, and biological defense programs appointed by President Obama. Again, not a scientist. He's a education Master of Science in Foreign Services. Master of Science in Foreign Services. What is that?
um,
What statistical methods are they using, and what scientific methodology are they using?
well,
But
probably the U.S. Army, but go ahead. Yeah.
so anyway, this guy goes on this podcast about 2 weeks ago. So there was a the Hoover Institute put out a 1 hour stream where they had talking heads. One was Jamie Metzel, the other was Andrew Weber. I can find the other guys real quick.
Thank goodness this is the Andrew we're talking about these days.
Rather than the
Yeah. See, he does not deserve the time to be brought up.
the opera, Andrew Weber, or this one. they're both pretty terrible. So the panelists were. So this is the Hoover Institute. Chris Isham, I don't know if you know him. Jamie Metzel, Andy Weber, Miles Yu, David Asher.
David Asher. Oh, I've heard of him. Gosh. Go ahead.
Anyway, David Asher seems to be someone who's making a point of, hey, as taxpayers, American taxpayers, where's all this stuff going? Jamie Metzel is sitting on the fence, and Andrew Weber is keeping, fairly sort of quiet in the background as well. But then up pops a stream where he's talking to. So the stream's called 80,000 Hours or something like that. And in that stream, the title of the stream was, let me tell you the exact title because it's illuminating when you. Andrew Weber on rendering bioweapons obsolete and ending the new nuclear war arms race. Right? Very impressive sounding title. And in that stream, he lays out in exquisite detail that the Health and Human Services, the Department of Defense, all these massive bureaucracies and what you would I'm trying to think of an encompassing way of trying to describe them, but the equivalent to me of, if you wanted an epitome of deep state, that would be it. right? These
Mm.
faceless. So anyway, he's on that program, and he's saying this, that there's an existential threat to the United States and the world. And that threat comes from the fact that there's an ever decreasing threshold for being able to take pathogens and start tweaking them in laboratories. And look, it doesn't, if you can afford cell cultures and you can get the sample, you could start passaging stuff to get something. I mean, whether you reach the capability of, um, you know, what we see in SARS-CoV-2 is one
Right.
thing, but
A level 4
you can,
pathogen.
you could definitely have a good crack at making something that was pretty nasty if you go around contaminating everywhere with it.
I thought that's why we had a biological weapons convention treaty.
Precisely. So, this their approach, which hasn't been discussed in public, as far as I'm aware, is to say, well, okay, how do we negate that as a national security issue? And their answer is vaccines, next generation vaccines, to go through and be able to mitigate and to spin up as quickly as possible a vaccine shot that can mitigate the impact of a potential biowarfare agent, or a spill, for accidental spill, even if there was the best intentions as possible. And that that line of thinking and reasoning, when you start seeing the countries involved that are going heavy on the the injectable, the gene therapy approaches, it suddenly starts making a lot of sense, because they're all the same countries that form basically the Five Eyes and um, the the West, as it were. And look, if it comes between us and China, I want us to win. Right? I'm no
But
fan of
that's
the.
kind of hard when us are paying them to help develop it. I mean, that's one of those questions in my mind was, and still is what's going on here, because it's not an us or them approach that's going on here. This is more of a who can be played against whom approach, which is the typical nation state approach. But at what point in time do the powers that be not become smart enough to realize, if we give something this extremely dangerous to people that we think we can manipulate, at what point in time do those people decide, wait a minute, we now have something that gives us a tool to no longer be manipulated, and guess who gets to be manipulated? The original people.
Mm,
I mean, and to take out the hypothetical that's U.S. versus China, China versus the U.S.,
mm,
or the other nations that supposedly were, with NATO allies, which raises all sorts of questions about NATO's role in
mm,
all of this.
Well, I don't know. Like, NATO to me is, I feel it's kind of toothless, and it's there at the behest of two countries basically, which is the United States and United Kingdom. The rest is just sort of tacked on for appearance's sake. And look, Turkey is supposed to be part of NATO. I don't think Turkey was in on the program for this. It's a way to sidestep those conventions, the biowarfare conventions that um, were supposed to stop this, and
Right.
by using the camouflage of pandemic prevention, they've gone and caused this very very problem. And to put the turd in the punch bowl, they've now gone and said, well, yeah, we've been planning this all along, and these vaccines are our way to say, haha, we've beaten the biowarfare zero-sum game.
Except they don't.
That's in this case, what they can say is, or from a game theory military perspective, they just had a really, really good test run. Okay,
Yeah,
with an
yeah, exactly. That's why when I hear the term gene therapy, my usual response is to say, and I understand where you're coming from, my usual response is to say, no, but they're working on it.
mm,
This was a test run. Uh, do I think that they planned that they were going to do this test run at this point in time? I'm not certain that they were ready to do the test run, but it happened, and they had some choices, and one of those choices meant covering it up and running full steam ahead.
mm.
And as a result of taking that approach, which is the approach I think that happened, they now have gained a tremendous amount of knowledge in a short period of time about what it takes to manipulate society, what it takes to play with this virus, what it takes for them to be allowed to run amok with the ability to insert genetic code into people, and basically how willing people are going to be to let you do that. And it goes right back to the animal motto, which is tell the people there's a problem. Yep, you've got one, SARS-CoV-2 and a pandemic. Tell them there's things to be done about it. Well, it's not treatments, because we're telling you treatments don't work, even though that's not true. It's vaccines. It's vaccines. And isolate yourself and stay away from other people and don't communicate and don't work and don't do jobs. And now you're in a controlled environment where the influence of who gets knowledge base to you is controlled by a media that I suspect that they own.
Oh yeah, this we know. That's a big
um,
leap.
and as a consequence, they have told you now that you're being good boys and girls, by doing everything they want you to do, and it's ameliorating the behavior. And now, of course, I think what they're doing is saying, well, you didn't obey us well enough, so now we're going to see SARS cases go back up
Mm.
and COVID cases go back up. Until you all become obedient children and do what we tell you to do, and don't rock the boat on the party line, and continue to take the vaccines. Look, if the vaccines at 1 week and 2 weeks don't have any more substantial effect than not being vaccinated, and the most promising one loses its effect at 4 weeks, I mean, what's the goal here? To somehow get people to be vaccinated more rapidly, because the more rapidly you can vaccinate people, the more you can play and run your experiment of checking to see what your modification of your genetic code will do with people.
Mm.
Um,
There's just questions in the chat I just want to address quickly. So someone's
sure.
asking, how does mRNA insert code into people? It's let's get something clear. The mRNA is not altering your genome in any way, and neither is the adenovirus vectors. Okay,
The DNA, yeah.
they're just putting genetic material in that can be translated into protein, and then that protein gets expressed in a controlled manner. They hope that doesn't cause that causes your immune response to kick in, etc., etc. There's no gene editing at this part. But if we've gone down this pathway of, well, okay, we're opening up this route to rushing through these types of technologies where they don't have this 10-year time frame where previous vaccines had, and you know there's other vaccines that were obviously quicker, but let's say 5 years.
Right.
The profits that become available shoot through the roof exponentially, because every drug therapy that we have, well, they can say, well, we can find a way to tailor that into a platform that we can give you with this proprietary technology. That's the threshold that we're at. And as I was speaking with Mark last night, and we said this: there's a choice. Okay, you can be part of two groups. You can be part of the experimental group, or you can be part of the control group. Okay,
Right.
you still have that choice.
Right.
Okay, but for sure as shit they're going ahead with this program, and it's got everything's based in the Department of Defense, the like I say, I don't want to get into the really insane aspects of it. Whether
Right.
people are freaking out about.
Well, it's
Uh,
not the Girl Scouts, is it?
no, it's not. It's not. Look, the military is not your friend. I understand military thinking, and I understand all those planners, but most look, General Mike Milley doesn't have a PhD in molecular biology. He doesn't, right? It's
Neither
his
does that other Andrew.
right, right. None of them do, but they're
Right.
listening. They're listening to presentations where they could probably follow what the guy's saying in terms of a scientific presentation. XYZ, here's our conclusion, and they probably say, okay, does it help in a military perspective?
Hmm.
Yes. Well, in that case, they can go for it. And
Right.
under that umbrella, it seems that they're able to do whatever they like
Hmm.
for national security.
Hmm.
And this is where we're at in the West right now. And you know, I'm left with this conclusion, right? And it's a disturbing one for me that as much as we can point the finger at Wuhan and the Chinese and um, the whole of the Chinese infrastructure and the military, etc., it's easy enough for me now with the level of information that we have. It's not conspiracy. This is just stuff that's legitimate and constraining it very, very tightly and just saying, hey, we're doing it we're doing it perhaps even worse than maybe what the Chinese would be doing. And I don't see the Chinese unrolling out multiple warp speed vaccines. And well, you could they don't need to, right? That's the that's the kicker here. They don't need to, but for us they do. And look, I know there's differences between you and Sheila right now, but Sheila's trying. Sheila's been saying to me, I've got to try and speak to these Texas Health and Human Services.
Right.
Okay, and I'm like, okay, that's at least that's some sort of bringing it to the
Oh,
attention of.
absolutely. That's what I was trying to do with her. I
Mm,
mean, we actually had a presentation before Senator Kolkhorst
mm,
where Sheila was there and I was on the telephone. And as a result of that discussion, with my explaining what was going on, Senator Kolkhorst knelt down to the telephone. This is how Sheila described it. Knelt down to the telephone to listen to what I had to say, and then slammed the table and said, got up and said, "We're going to have a hearing.
mm,
The problem is I've not been called for the hearing."
mm. Well,
So the information is somewhat limited, but yes, we have to do something about it. I applaud her for that.
yeah, but
Absolutely.
Health and Human Services, what are you're going to the people that have run this program at a
Right.
higher level. They're
Right.
just going to turn around and say, "Oh yeah, that's
Yeah. Yeah. So it has to be, it's going to have to be beyond that. And that's kind of what we're working on. And that's some of the stuff that I can't really talk to you about,
Mm,
but you're going to see it evolve to address the people that are getting out there in a place where they will do something for the people. It can no longer be kept in the shadows, but it has to be done properly. And you're right. You can't go to the people that are causing the problem and saying fix your problem, because they're going to go, who, us?
mm,
We didn't do anything wrong, right?
mm.
Um, but but kudos for anybody trying to do anything. But no, we're in the process of trying to take this message out there. Um, I want people to be aware of Mark's program.
Mm.
I want people to be aware of your program. I want anybody who's actually disseminating the information that people need to know to be out there and to be recognized, and for everybody listening to share those with as many people as they can, because that knowledge is the same type of stuff that here they're saying, don't dumb it down. The people don't have to have the ability to fully grasp it. They know when they are being conned.
Mm.
And the people that I've been meeting know they've been conned. And they're not pleased about it, and they want something to happen, and they recognize the potential problems that can happen if this continues to run amok without these people being held criminally accountable for it.
Mm.
I mean, that's just one part of the equation. I mean, the ability for doctors to treat patients according to how they believe patients are responding. I see both sides of it. I have nothing wrong with physicians treating you with medications that they believe are making a difference. However, the scientist in me says, but we also need the type of RCT to know whether what you think is really what's happening. Otherwise, you stand the risk of more consequences. I mean, during World War II, there was a study that looked at the care in German prisoner war camps in World War II, where they had penicillin, bandages, and aspirin. And there was a lower death rate among the prisoners in in Nazi prisoner camps than there were in the best hospitals in London.
Mm.
And the idea that came out of that was maybe some of the best hospitals in London were doing things that maybe weren't really helpful. They just thought they were helpful. So just because doctors think they see a response doesn't mean that's really what's going on. Those observational things get useful to develop clinical trials to actually investigate, but it's this absence of measuring an outcome that is a real outcome versus something that could be any of a number of things. I mean, the symptoms that are used on these vaccine trials are basically just symptoms of an infectious disease of any sort, or a cancer for that matter, with many of them. So to use those symptoms as a determinant about who's got COVID-19, who doesn't have COVID-19, what was the successful outcome of vaccines or drugs being used in hospital for patients with COVID-19 is not a very scientific, objective way of looking to find a measurable outcome that's meaningful.
You get no argument from me. And like I said, look, I'd say this: if there's we know that like frontline workers are taking a hit. There is something going around. I'm happy to put my weight of argumentation behind that. Yeah, they've messed up. Well, in quotation marks, they've messed up with a dual use agent, which puts us into the domain of a biowarfare agent. It may not be 100% lethal. It might not be hemorrhagic fever, but I don't want to deny someone who's having to be at the front end of dealing with this any option whatsoever, especially if that was my wife, that was my mother, that was my father. I'd want to make sure that there was as much protection as possible, including simple things, PPE, the therapies available for early treatment. I still want to see, I do think that ivermectin as a whole seems to be coming out. There's signal in the noise. And
yeah, one of the things about ivermectin that I think is very astonishing is that it seems to have an ability to interfere with the nuclear protein core complex exchange between cytoplasm and nucleus. That seems to be one of the things that it has a unique capability of. So I think ivermectin deserves to be studied. And I'll let you know that that's one of the things that we're working on right now, is working with a couple different people, laying the foundation for how to do a real clinical trial with ivermectin, with nebulized steroids, with things that other people have said are useful. And I think these drugs need to be looked at, and should have been looked at a year ago.
Mm.
A year ago.
Yeah. And well, let's try and bring some useful data. I don't know if you've seen this paper. Let me just try and. Oh, I've got to try and. I hope I filed it yesterday. But it.
That's the worst thing when you file it away. And it's like, where did I put it?
Yeah, and but basically the paper was showing that, so it's paper out of one hospital, but the cytokine storm, which everyone has
Right.
been making a big deal of, uh, they're saying, oh, we're not actually seeing it, even in the worst cases in the hospital. And I don't know if people know that study that I'm talking about. It was in the Discord. I don't want to. I'm trying to speak to Richard, so I'm pretty sure I filed it somewhere. Um,
And that's what I've called inflammothrombotic response, which is different than cytokine storm, which is when the people get into problems, and I would argue is the major reason why they're dying with COVID-19, especially supported by the autopsy studies. But go ahead, not to interrupt. Sorry.
well, it's just that there's so if what's the ideal agent that you would want to produce to cause maximum disruption? It's one that has multiple mechanisms of action and pathways, so it becomes, people start clashing about, well, what is it that you're dealing with? And then people become heavily invested in, well, it is cytokine storm, it is viral pneumonia, it is endothelial
Right.
disease. It's and suddenly all these things start appearing in the diagnostic criteria where it becomes virtually everything.
Right.
And I'm not saying that those symptoms, I'm sure that they exist, but we to to then just say, okay, we've got this broad encompassing thing from, oh, you can go from asymptomatic and not have a problem, but still we're worried about you developing the possibility of neurodegenerative disorders a year, 2 years later, to the unhealthy, comorbid diabetic who's going to pick it up and get taken out in a few hours, literally a few hours, right? A day, 2 days.
Yeah.
It becomes a very hard proposition to argue to people, oh, let's do this study, when someone's got to be in their bonnet about, oh, no, 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 we have to do the other direction. And yeah, so I'm struggling with, I want I want it to be as thorough as possible with respect to the double-blind trials, triple blind.
Right. Well, that's why our study had used 10 drugs
Mm,
and did a layering effect. And out of those 10 drugs, we ended up with 52 drug treatment combinations,
mm,
to figure out what the heck was critical in the treatment of this. And the only way that I knew to do it, the very simple scientific way, was to say, here's all these mechanisms of action, all these proposed ideas for treatments at the very different aspects, whether it be viral attachment, viral replication, T cell response, B cell response, and the cytokines and or interleukins and interferons that are associated with that, and to try to sort it out and see what happened. And I would love for that study to be repeated. And the numbers are fairly consistent with what some other people are talking about. What is very clear is that remdesivir was a dramatic failure,
mm.
coming up with we saw only a 28% response when it was the first drug of choice, which is less than chance. 1/3 better, 1/3 the same, 1/3 worse.
Mm.
Um,
Oh, and let's not
but
forget they've got another small molecule therapy that they're touting now. And this is a problem with the look. Don't take this the wrong way, Richard, please. The American model of corporate profit driving
oh, good golly,
healthcare.
Miss Molly, was American the thing in there I was supposed to get offended by?
But well, the American healthcare system, where you've incentivized profit to the nth degree, that
Oh, listen, I've criticized this model across the board for just being focused more on the money than on the actual outcome I mean, that's my claim to fame is the fact that I've been taking on big pharma over the years and being beaten up for it, and I gladly accept that. But I don't want to take you off where you were going, because I know you had a good point. But you're preaching to the choir when you talk about the American healthcare system being a model that's focused more on money than actual healthcare.
Yes, well, I mean, where it's an obvious conclusion in where I am going, which is, okay, well, now we're seeing this technology-driven type medicine, which they're calling it. All sounds really nice, right? Individualized medicine, blah de
Yeah.
blah, and but what it all comes down to is at a higher level, they're looking at you as test subjects all the
Mm.
way, and there's supposed to be a whole bunch of legislation and ethical boards and to stop that. And we I can't, it's difficult for me to wrap my head around that. We've been able to sidestep that in the name of, well, the fact that bio the biowarfare programs have superseded the medical and scientific programs that the public face,
We
which
we have violated the Biological Weapons Convention Treaty. We have violated the 1947 Nuremberg Code. We have violated the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. We have violated across the board the AMA Code of Ethics for experimentation on patients. And those are the ones that come to mind. All that just got thrown the heck out the window with a real lack of consideration for the implications that had on healthcare, on experimenting on human beings, on not conducting animal research of something that should have been conducted before it was ever conducted on human beings.
mm,
The vaccines, the PCR test is a great test for looking for genetic sequences, but that is what it was designed for. It's not a diagnostic test. It doesn't tell you whether the genetic code is alive or dead. It doesn't tell you what the biological consequences of that genetic code is. So the FDA, in its infinite wisdom, made PCR and EUA test for a disease that it's now being used as the test for the EUA drugs, the vaccines that are being used, whether you call them a gene therapy or a drug or a vaccine. I see. I go along with drug because the term vaccine buys them legal protection, and I don't think you get legal protection by calling yourself a vaccine. I think you get held accountable because you've got a drug. And it's not that the FDA is doing its job reviewing the drugs, because they view in the last couple of years they pulled off twice as many drugs as they've approved
mm,
by the US FDA, which raises a serious question about just how thorough are they reviewing the things coming before them. Well, I guess we've seen that with the EUA documents for these vaccines, because they just waved them on by. Please go ahead and try these things out, when the data shows that the vaccines don't work.
yeah. And like I say, there's obviously there's there's bigger factors going on here right now, and this is why I'm concerned about the usual mechanisms that perhaps could have kicked in. Perhaps FDA would have stepped up and said, well, we're not, we can't do that. We're duty bound not to. Uh,
Did you watch the hearings, the FDA hearings for these three drugs?
uh, no, I didn't.
That's all right. You didn't miss much. I mean, you didn't miss any science. You didn't miss any objective comments or criticisms or review of the science. You didn't miss any review of the EUA documents. What I saw was a chairman pushing through, literally controlling, like he was schoolyard taskmaster with a bunch of elementary school kids not happy with how they were behaving, going, "You're going to, stop that, stop that, stop that." I mean, curtailing anything that amounted to a potential debate or discussion on anything, pushing through. I mean, it was obvious. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to realize that these were destined to go through, one way
Right.
or the other,
Yeah.
and there was no resistance to it. I mean, and the first one, the Pfizer one, the only intelligent question I heard was from an attorney, for God's sake, and then I think they voted to go ahead with it anyway. It's like, you know, another week with some serious questions and discussions wouldn't have hurt. Um, in the review of any of these emergency use authorization. These are not even FDA approved drugs,
Mm.
and to be calling for um, vaccine passports and a requirement for things for emergency use drugs, which, remember, when you look at their outcomes, is me telling you, how would you like to take this blue pill that's not going to cure your disease, and for you won't give you an erection either, Kevin,
Damn.
but but please take it
Mm.
because I want you to take it. I mean, it doesn't make the matrix that far-fetched.
No, no. And like I say, people are going to be fed up of me saying it right now, but the the only option I see right now is if you're disgusted by all of this, is to not take part. You have a choice to be in the negative control group, right? They can still mine the data, etc. They can do all that. You are subject to that because you're registered from birth, right? They've
Yeah.
got your documents and
Did have you did you notice on the NCT, on the national, on the clinical trials website, that Pfizer and Moderna both quit recruiting for patients when Biden took office?
say that again. The NCT.
The National Clinical Trials website, if you go look at it, unless it changed in the past week, both Pfizer and Moderna stopped recruiting for its clinical trials of their vaccines.
Oh, just their
One,
regular vaccines, just
yeah,
normal.
on their experimental vaccines for the BioNTech, and for I forgot the one that Moderna is called. They quit their research study on their national clinical trials website for these experimental vaccines, these experimental drugs, stopped actively recruiting patients once Biden was in office. One on the 20th, and the other one was 1 or 2 days either side. So you're right. You can make a choice about whether you want to be in the experimental group or clinical or control group, because they've apparently stopped doing the standard approach,
Mm,
and it's clear at this point in time that they don't need to continue to put money on it. They're already collecting the data, right?
mm.
I mean, they've got more than 1 million people a day in the United States are being vaccinated with experimental drugs that have not been shown to have a statistically significant different outcome from the control group, the people that have not been vaccinated. But out of fear and worry, and I would argue manipulation, um, people are running forward to get these vaccines, these drugs, that have not been shown experimentally to make a difference,
Uh,
and probably won't give you an erection either.
well, I get, it depends how much it jacks with your autonomic nervous system, right? And
Yeah.
that's
Yeah. And that's another thing I want to point out. I know you're going to make a point here, but these vaccines, what they're encoding for is the spike protein. And that spike protein, of all the people on the planet, other than potentially myself, after listening and thinking and reviewing, thanks to you, should be keenly aware that the production of a product that will cross the blood-brain barrier and wreak havoc to our central nervous system I'm sorry, this is where I'm not bald, but I have every reason to be by wanting to grab my hair and pull it out and say, does this make sense to anybody that you would want to have your body make a product that we know crosses the blood-brain barrier and causes central nervous system damage, and what that means not only immediately but for long-term sequelae?
Mm, yep. Um, so I've
Thought process there, ladies and gentlemen, please,
mm, yeah.
because I can see from your response, you've been trying to get that point across to people, and you know,
Yeah, so my feeling with that is that there's people can handle the idea of if I'm going to get sick with pneumonia, etc. There's a sort of a comprehension of that because most people have dealt with chest infections of some form or another. They get what that means. They get what the flu means. But when you start saying that there's a real possibility that a significant subset of the population is at risk from brain disorders, you're in a you're in a people don't want to go there. They don't. There's a sort of they want to focus on what it is that they can handle. And
right,
if you're saying to them, oh, and we don't know, right? Even the best scientists, and I say the only people that really know are the ones that have been running the experiments right now. And I'm not in that position. And what I've seen in the last year, there's very, very few groups or labs that I would trust right now to come forward with the data. How many how many labs are going to be willing to sacrifice the gravy train of the research dollars
mm,
to be saying, oh, you know what, we injected them with these spike derived gene therapies, and yeah, all our animals are dead.
yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Are they really going to come forward and say that? I'm not so sure. I'm not so
yeah. They
sure.
they better hope they have funding somewhere else.
Yeah, because they're not going to get it from. Oh, well, it's not that they would struggle to get even the word out into the scientific press, I would
Right.
imagine. And they've done it with the virus. So they've said, oh, the mice are dying, the monkeys are not doing very well, um, and we can see them hammering. And look, it's a big concern for me. I'm super concerned about this long hauler, right? That to me is I've framed it this way this week, is if you took Alzheimer's or Parkinson's and you suddenly drop that into a 20 to 30-year-old,
Hmm.
that's what long hauler is going to manifest
Yeah.
as. That's what you're going to see. Is there a way back from that? Yeah, somewhat, but are you going to be the same? I don't. I don't think so. I would. I've had my own experience with those. They said it was Epstein-Barr virus for me in my 20s, and I had a very prolonged post-viral state, I guess, to call it something. It's never the same afterwards. SARS, my run-in with it, has left me in a bad way, just with, struggle to get around beyond doing something like this. And look, I'm sitting down so much, Richard. I feel like I'm just, I don't know, if you travel on the shitty seats in the aeroplanes, right? But if you do long haul flights in those seats, you get a sore ass, right? If you
Right.
can't lay down, and that's literally what I'm dealing with right now, because I don't even have the the capacity to be moving around much without getting severely exhausted.
Mm.
So I know that that's a real thing. I know, because of head injury, that I'm seeing, there's Parkinsonian symptoms down my left side. I get it. I crack my head. It's, that happens, right? But it's worse, right? And I'm climbing out of it, which the body seems to do. I recovered somewhat in my 20s, and I'm not in my 80s yet, so there'll still be some recovery, but you're not coming back to where you were
Right.
prior to the run-in with these agents. And I don't think it's just a person. It's my own view, folks. Don't I don't think a vaccine's going to help that in any instance, and I could see it making it worse right now. Yeah, that's my thoughts on
Yeah,
that.
no, and I would agree. I mean, when you think about the fact that the Pfizer and Moderna has 13.1 billion mRNAs coming in and 50 billion, according to Janssen, for its DNA encodement for spike proteins, and you just compare that, I mean, the potential for a dramatic increase in the spike proteins floating around increases with the vaccine.
Mm. Yeah. Well, so
And what I got, yeah,
here's the
go ahead.
argument that I've heard counter to that. Okay,
Right.
that yeah, you get that in order to build the spike protein, it's got to get into the cell, and there's going to be cellular mechanisms that the proteases, which will chop that thing up, such that it can be presented to the cell surface as a antigen.
For T cells, yeah.
Yeah, maybe, but there's other things to take into account. How small are those chunks of protein? And if we look at the spike protein right now, there's multiple linear sections of it that are problematic. So the sequence around the furin cleavage site, oh, that's neurotoxic at the cholinergic receptor.
Uh-huh.
There's the potential for preongenesis sites around the receptor binding domain. Okay, how big are those chunks? And then
Mm-hmm.
and then we don't know. So eventually the immune system's going to come in, bust that cell apart, and then what gets released into the
Right.
central into the systemic circulation?
Right.
And no one
And,
answers those.
and it's a numbers game, because obviously the more of those spike proteins that are made, even if it's a small percentage that gets out,
Mm.
well, a small percentage of a big number is a
Problem.
big number.
Yeah, it's
Problem.
problematic. Yeah.
Yeah. So doing that with a vaccine is it's just tantamount to asking for a disaster. And, as a scientist and as a physician, I would just find that unconscionable and unethical to do without more data.
Mm.
Do no harm, or some equivalent of that, whatever we're, whatever it is that allows you to function as a human being, as a scientist. I mean, unfortunately, we're sampling from the human population, so there's bad people as well as good people that get into the field, and 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 making the argument for any potential good at a gain of function. There were obviously, I would argue, there's probably good people that were doing some of that work too, but unfortunately there were also bad people that were unrestrained,
Mm.
and whether it was a matter of money or power or prestige or whatever, still went ahead and did something that should not have been done. And now it's released.
Mm.
Now the genie's out of the bottle. The genie does not go back into the bottle. It's almost like you're looking inside Pandora's box and going, well, we might as well open it up and see if there's hope in there somewhere. As the last thing
Yeah,
to come out,
but that's the whole end game, right? Is that they can say,
right?
aha, we've got this next gen medicine.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And you may or may not have heard me say that I'm not at all convinced that SARS-CoV-3 and 4 hasn't been released through what they've been doing with the vaccines.
Mm. Yeah. And look, there's another point that I would just add on to this. Any sort of long-term side effects that will come out of this, I can absolutely guarantee you, in those meetings where they were talking about the cost-benefit analysis, they said, well, we've got Project XR 4894 where we can deal with the amyloid buildup, say, for example, in the, and there's another profit pipeline for us, right? And
Right.
that doesn't even have to come from us inducing it, but everything comes into them building these very, very complex multifactorial, multivariable models, and then saying, okay, hey, hello, big boy.
How you doing, buddy?
What's the matter? You hungry? Daddy put mummy made chocolate pancakes, and there's a glass of milk for you downstairs.
Bribing him with food.
I forgot what I was saying. The
Oh, products with prion-like disease or
Oh
amyloid
yeah,
deposits or things
anything,
in the pipeline. Yeah.
anything. That the whole push now is to go for, um, like we've had the century of pharmaceuticals, comes the century of gene therapies. Sorry, I think so. Is there some milk by it? Daddy poured you some milk. Yes. Just he's the only one that drinks milk, so it's just
What type, if I can ask?
just regular milk.
Whole milk. Okay.
Yeah. Um,
3.2%. Okay.
yeah. The Yeah. So again, this it's coming down to people. You have to make the choice. What is it that you're going to
Right.
do? Where do you
Right.
step into the medical system um, to have for them to start making the interventions? And like I said, of course, new drugs are going to be in the pipeline, but we've seen where the pharmaceutical companies are going. They they only can have a patent for 15 years,
Right.
and it makes more sense for them to be able to say, well, we can patent every individual, right? Because every individual is going to essentially have a unique gene and epigenomic profile, and you treat that so that everyone becomes the patent target for the patent. And so there's no there's nothing
There's
to
no.
make
Yeah.
generic, right? In this sense, I guess they could say the I don't know, production maybe, I don't know, but if that's where the break point is. But
Mm.
the I say I don't have good solutions, and I don't know. I guess so what we have to sit here and just hope we can convince people that they have a choice. I guess is the
Yeah, and I think that we need to work very strongly to make sure that the governments can't coerce people to take it.
mm,
That is using a term that other people I know would use. That's tyranny.
mm.
And that's probably a kind word for what it really is. Slavery might be a better term for it.
Well, we've become the monkeys, the test
Yeah,
monkeys.
yeah.
Um, look, man, I love my monkeys, right? But they didn't love me.
Yeah, yeah, of
they,
course.
they
Well, I probably can say the same thing about my rats in the rat lab that I ran for a year, you know, and the mongrel dogs that we use. But yeah, I mean, it's great to have the animals, but when the humans become the animals,
mm,
it's the same species.
yeah,
Yeah,
and this is and like I say, they don't, Mark from Housatonic, he just made a great point, which is they don't even care. They want you to mix up the vaccines, right? Because it
yeah,
becomes data for them, right? You'll have a whole group that had the pure
right.
batches, or the same batches, one after the other, and then you have people that had a mix and match. So they got the AstraZeneca, and then everyone freaked out about that one, the cheap one, right? The
Yeah,
cheap one that is of potential. If there was one that you could say, okay, there seems to be something approximating uh, a benign approach to the therapy, but of course we know there's not, because it's just
right.
a foreshadowing of what's to come. But like I say, even the negative press towards the AstraZeneca, when you put it in the context of Moderna or Pfizer, where Moderna wasn't making any money. They had nothing in the pipeline that was to say, oh, we're a viable company. But then suddenly along comes SARS-CoV-2, SARS-CoV-2, and all this new technology that they can trial on people. And yeah, you're not going to go out waving your AR at someone or something and solve that problem. It's because then look, Randall, they can institutionalize you and do what they want to you under any mental health acts, right? And they can they'll stick you whatever they think they need to get you under control. And
Which raises real questions about the spike protein crossing the blood-brain barrier and how much more that helps them
yeah, yeah.
when you think about it.
The more people flip out, the more crazy they get. And like I say, there's only so much pressure that the people can take. Even your special forces, SAS or Navy SEAL, you start drilling into their kneecaps. They're gonna start squealing at some point. You can break people easily enough. We have it down to a science.
Right.
Um,
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately, very, very much unfortunately, and it didn't take much. It took a year of sort of mild lockdowns to have people running out saying, "Please vaccinate me," to get things back to normal.
Mm-hmm. And that's not going to do it. It's just, I've made this comment to many people. This is just an outstandingly, exquisitely done experiment.
Mm, yeah.
And for people who don't get that, congratulations. You are the example of what I just said.
Mm, no. And I don't want to be hard on Mr. and Mrs. Smith living
Oh,
paycheck to paycheck, right? Where they've got children and mouths to feed, and if there's a technical barrier to just being able to sort of climb up, so you could be getting up the mountain and you can just get up and just peer over the edge of the outcrop that you're trying to get round, and you can see, oh, there's more to go. But even to get to that point requires so much effort. You need to be up to date on so much literature that
mm-hmm.
it's overwhelming for people. And until you understand the heuristic, the rule of thumb which they're using, it is experiment. We're running the experiment right now, and and they got the justification for it. I say,
Mm-hmm.
Richard, you watch or listen. It's a audio only podcast, but the fact that they're saying this negates the existential threat of the 21st century. The nuclear wars of the 21st century are going to be biowarfare, and this is their answer to it. Well, okay. Are you?
Didn't take us long to get back to 1917, did it?
No, no. But I guess you have the choice at the
Chemical
moment.
versus biological, yeah.
Yeah, you can sign up. You can sign up for. There was an argument for going into the military, as it were, because you probably stand more chance. You're of more use if you're within the military, right? They're going to give you some armor and some protection. You'd hope, right? At least you'll get a gas mask and NBC suit.
Well, you might, or you might just be another experimental group.
Again,
They've done that, and the U.S. If people think that, look, I was born and raised in the United States, and I believe in the principle of the shining city on the hill and trying to do the right thing and to make an example for the world. But I also have lived, I turned 65 not long ago, and I've lived long enough to see enough things go bad that makes me very much aware of all the bad people that are around. There's also very good people. And I think those very good people are looking for answers right now. And that's why it's critical that they be provided solid scientific information and not this misinformation that just exposes their vulnerability while others are profiteering by that misinformation. Names we don't need to add, but the truth of the matter is there's enough blood on the hands of the United States and other countries to go around, and the only honest, moral way that I can see of this being resolved is for people in all the countries, including the United States, that are responsible to be held criminally liable and punished.
Yeah. But who does the how do you
Good
get them?
question.
How do you get them?
Right.
This is the thing, and so this is where I'm going for the Gandhi approach, right? It's the um peaceful or peaceful resistance. If you go, if you, they want you to go out, they want you to go out and cause chaos on the streets. That's
Right.
great for them.
Right.
You,
Gives them a perfect excuse, doesn't it?
yeah,
Yeah. I mean, one of the people that I know who's very active, um, was in Washington D.C. on January 6th, if I remember correctly. What this person was doing, entering a legislative body in that setting,
mm,
was beyond me. I mean, that couldn't go down well.
mm,
You know, that was only going to go down bad, despite maybe good intentions. Um, and there's that problem also. Be very careful the crowds that you're with, because some of the people in those crowds have other motives other than you.
mm,
And that, but see, again, I'm going to go back to, I think, the genuine intelligence of the people. There's enough intelligence, particularly when they're getting correct information, to do the right thing, whether it's a Gandhi passive resistant approach,
mm.
or more the Viking approach. Um,
Well,
you
let's say
know,
that there's room for there's a time when you're going to need either or, right?
right. I think both
Yeah,
are going to be necessary for this. Yeah.
but I think
Um,
right now, because we're still trying to aggregate the data,
right.
sit back and watch, right? Because that way you can make an informed decision as to where to go. And I don't know how I've been telling people wait till December, January, the end of this year, so we can see what it is that they're planning on doing, whether they'll come up with the variant scare,
I don't
etc.
think we have to wait that long. No,
You think there are more waves coming?
I
There are more.
think they are, this is accelerating. And I think as they're being caught, as this stuff is being exposed, they have the same options they had before. Either step it up
Mm,
or roll over. And these are not the people that roll over.
no.
So they're going to step it up, which shortens everybody's timeline.
Mm, yeah. And
Um,
look, it's okay to get in a fight, right? Just know that you're getting into a fight, so you can at
oh
least
yeah,
get your guard
yeah,
up, right?
yeah.
Um, the
Don't walk into a gunfight with a knife, right?
yeah,
Be prepared, and realize that it's real, um, and it's important, and it has implications not only for people's health, but the type of world that you want to live in.
mm. And I would be very, very careful right now of the switch in the narrative to saying it's the Chinese, right?
Yeah.
I'm not absolving the Chinese at this stage,
No,
right?
no.
Like, they're still limited in what they can do, and there's plenty of options. If we wanted to say, we could go to the trade war with them, and we can just hold. We don't have to buy their crappy shit, and we can bring back the economies to our own, the
And
industries.
and
I mean,
and we don't have to pay for their lab to do
right?
experimentation, and provide them that knowledge base.
Yeah.
I mean, this is sleeping with the enemy
Mm,
right now is what's happening. And frequently the enemies are just as clever as those who think that they're clever sleeping with them. Yeah, all those points. You do not have to roll over. There's more than one way to handle your involvement in a fight.
Mm.
One is, I would argue, as you've said repeatedly, and it sounds like you've been saying it repeatedly for people, which group do you want to be in? The experimental study group
Mm.
or the control group?
Mm.
I'll take the latter. Thank you.
Mm.
If you can control a source of funding, control that source of funding. Don't give money to sources that don't have your best interest at heart.
Mm.
Now, I thought that was called the free economy, but certainly something to keep in mind. And everybody is doing something, whether they like to admit it or not. Inaction is an action.
Mm-hmm.
It's a decision that you've made to allow people to continue to roll over you. A decision not to take the vaccine or not to be part of the experimental group, when done, which has to be done firmly, it's an affirmative action, is a decision that you're making.
Yeah. Yeah, and especially if you've got people that are dependent on you, right?
Yeah.
You've got kids, you've got family, you've got, it doesn't have to be kids. You're looking after the older generation. Maybe you've stepped up for that responsibility. Everyone has a part to play in this, and not being suckered in by people who are driven. But it's not even, I was having this discussion with Mark last night. It's not money either that they don't need money. These people,
no,
right? It's not.
They have it.
Yeah,
right.
They. It's all power, and it's all. Well, I just liken it to mobs and gangs, and that's what these corporations are. And they'll team up when will take over their territory when it's suitable, and they'll do whatever it takes to get the jackboot on top of you.
Yeah, they're not going to go quietly into that good night. What is it? Game of Thrones. Cersei had something. I forgot the guy that she did it with. I didn't like the character, but he made some comment to her about knowledge is power in her courtyard, and she looked at her, didn't even look at her guards, and said, "Kill him." And they drew their swords, and then she said, "No, wait, I changed my mind. Put your swords away." And she looked at him and she said, "Power is power." And that, I mean, that was such a telling moment. I mean, knowledge is a type of power, but absolutely the type of power these people have, that's power. They're not looking for money. They don't need more money. They'll take more money, but they don't need it. Power is power. And as long as they're allowed to have that power, they'll continue to do whatever. Taking that power away from them is something that can be done, but it requires an intelligent, informed decision and action. And again, I can't see if you're looking at responses there when you're smiling on the screen from people posting, but I don't have your site up. So
I'm just, it's a headline. I can. New York's mystery surge in COVID cases is freaking experts out.
Okay. Who are the experts that are being freaked out? That's right. What I want to
know. There's the link, but I'm not. Anyone, all the people that are, I don't know why that didn't turn into a hot link for you, but I think you can just copy paste that into.
Yeah.
So, mask mandates, blah, blah, blah. They've had vaccine and it's going up.
Yep.
There's this Dutch guy, Geert, I forget the second name.
But, I'm sorry, I've read the headline. Okay.
Just. And he makes the point of vaccinating and putting the selective pressure onto the virus that we are doing with like these next gen treatments, antibody, synthetic antibodies, nanoparticles, vaccines, etc., it leads to a sort of runaway cascade of, the virus is going to try and find niches all the time. And but again, in this instance, I'm just back to the situation of, well, if that's the biology of it, and biology is like physics, it's a little messier maybe, but again, the best approach right now is just make sure you're not getting exposed too much to this, right? Because I don't know how you feel about this, but I'm kind of the opinion, if you can get the exposure just right, and this is a tough call to make, because what's just right for some people is going to be different
Too
for
much or
others.
not enough, yeah.
Your body it's got all these mechanisms in it that will help you get over it. But then, how many are going to be left in long hauler type conditions? How many are going to be, and then we get back to the question of, okay, well, who's responsible? Well, so the people on our side that funded this work, that's going for the neutralization of the biowarfare, or the mutually assured destruction doctrine, are going to point at someone else. They'll say, "Oh, he can now we can blame China, right?"
Right.
And we don't mind going over there, and we love smashing shit up, right? And the public will get behind and watch the gun cam footage, and we'll. It's a very, very dark place that it's
shock and awe, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and look, China's massive, right? And it's got so many. You're not taking China as a country. You could cripple it, I guess, but you'd never get rid of China. Can't you?
And you have to, again, they didn't start this. They're not in this alone. So if you think you're solving a problem by taking out one country, you have to go after the people that have done it.
And there's I don't know how much you sort of follow the sort of Belt and Road developments, and how there's this, there's a push to break the hegemony of the United States, right? And this, you have to sort of get up to speed with Pan-Eurasian supercontinent, that trading bloc, and China becomes a factory of the world, and goods are sort of they're making new trade routes across land, sea routes, etc. They just signed a 25-year deal with Iran. Okay, this was, if you follow this work, this was expected. This move by China and Iran, and you've heard Biden sort of say, well, we need the equivalent of our Belt and Road, etc. Well, yeah, kind of, and I would imagine that's part of the bigger picture, that they do have those. We know that there are infrastructure being built up into Alaska, getting ready to sort of link with the forget that part of Russia, but
Ukraine.
It's not Ukraine. It's the bit near the bit,
Siberia.
Siberia. That's the one.
Yeah. The big cold place.
Yeah, with all the mosquitoes. So I don't. It's not countries. It's power games. It's these people getting control and them maintaining their grip on power and control, and them hypnotizing you with shiny gadgets, such that you get sucked into the
Matrix.
The Matrix, the game. You become the tax slave, the debt slave, we know, it's not like it's not already here. It's just this is the next generation of it.
Right.
Guess.
More sophisticated.
Yeah. Because people get wise to it, right? That That everyone got the information, right? That's what the internet gave them. They gave them the information
Right.
to say, "Oh, hang on a minute, I'm being toyed with here," right? These rewards, in the broadest sense, are just forms of control, and I'm subject to that programming as well, right? I'm just as much of a lab monkey as as everyone else. This is the well, I don't want to black pill everyone, right? Because
Skinner would be so proud of you.
if he'd seen where we were able to sort of take that line of thinking, you know, we literally sort of peeled open the neural architecture of choice and conditioning, and very sophisticated now, the understanding of it.
Well, for anybody who's confused, realize that the military has been doing this at least since the 1940s. So that gives them, 70, 80 years of experience. And like most knowledge base, as you accumulate more and more and more, it's an exponential growth or some derivative thereof. And that's what we're seeing. And it's been very well played. Very well played. I mean, the scientist in me and the physician in me, who's both upset and dismayed and trying to speak out the truth, is also genuinely impressed with how well this has been done.
Yeah, I mean, look, man, you see armies marching in, in formation, and it all looks spectacular, right? But the end point of that is not where you really want to be. You want to be going or heading, I think.
Right.
And I think I'm gonna have to, like I say, I'm suffering with this sore arsitis. I'm sitting down, so I'm limited into the.
We've given people a couple hours, and you should probably take a break and get up and stretch around and that type of thing. So.
Yeah. So, Richard, thank you very much. Let's talk
Kevin,
again.
good to see you again.
Yeah. Keep fighting the good fight, I guess, and
you too.
Give and report on it. Give people hope that there is some pushback at least. Right.
I have no intentions of giving up on this. I will let you take the Gandhi approach and the colorful Gandhi approach, and which I have found helpful, just to be able to look in every so often and see you continuing to not give up, and see the people continue to grasp and understand more and more and more. That's very meaningful. And helpful to me, believe it or not. The people that assist with the information and knowledge coming this direction, stuff that I wouldn't have had known about without the database coming in and providing me the knowledge to put together pieces to then move forward on. I mean, that's kind of the foundation of science, but it's the very sharing and beneficial part about science. And I suspect that everybody in the group that we're dealing with is much better at sharing that knowledge base than those that are trying to manipulate society right now. They're much more focused on their own power and not sharing that power. And that and the arrogance that I think that they have about the impossibility of being exposed or people understanding, I think is going to be their undoing.
Well, I hope so. So I'm going to stop my stream. Just quick word with you, Richard, before I do. I have to stretch my legs. So people are listening and everything. I'm going to end it here now. I'm going to have to remove it from YouTube because this was too much into the weeds with the vaccines, etc. But
send me a copy of it if you would, though, please.
Well, that's what I'm going to speak to you about right now. So, guys, take care. God bless. Links down below.
Have a good evening, everybody.
Please help please help us stay in the fight, and I will see you in the next stream.
Yes,
Take care.
support Kevin, please.
God bless.